That song kind of says it all, right? How hard is it to remember that? That we actually are light. That we aren't the things that have happened in our lives. That we aren't the color of our skin. That, whew. What would this world be if we could all just remember that? And that's part of why we come together here. I mean, the work we're doing here in Unity is not just I'm going to feel good on Sunday and go home and check, done. This is like the yes. This is like the deep yes of remembering for ourselves and for the world. And how we do that, Unity has these really fabulous tools, really powerful, transformative tools. And one of those powerful tools is what we call the 12 powers. And how Charles held the 12 powers. So he got these from Emma Curtis Hopkins, which I mentioned last week, right? She had what she understood to be the 12 gates, the gates that led you to the truth of who you were, to your Christ, Buddha, Atman, Gaia nature, right? And so Charles sort of took that and ran with it, which is what he did. And he figured out a way for us to be able to use those powers. They're already ours. It's not something you have to get or you have to learn. You already have all these powers. The question is, how are you using them? How are they showing up in your life? How are you applying them? The best example I can come up with is sometimes people say, I just don't have faith in God or anything like that. And I say, well, you do have faith. You have faith that you don't have faith, right? You're using your power of faith. You actually are using your power of faith. So last week, we talked about the inner architecture of transformation. And we looked at faith, strength, wisdom, and love as to how we shore ourselves up. And this week, we're going to be looking at activating the energies of change. And we're going to be looking at power, imagination, understanding, and will. And again, we're looking at how these 4 powers can be harnessed in such a way to support change and transformation. Because get on board or get dragged. We're getting dragged right now, and it's really not comfortable. So how do we become an active participant in the process of transformation? So I love the idea of the rainbow that Gabe mentioned, right? Because the 12 powers are a rainbow, and if you actually want to see them all, if you go into our meditation garden, if you've never been there, our fabulous Lissa Masters actually painted, there's a set of steps that quote-unquote go to nowhere. Lissa painted them for each of the 12 powers and lined them up, and they don't take you nowhere, they take you up in consciousness. That's where they're taking you. And so these are all of the 12 powers, and we're doing 4 each week. If you want to know more about these powers, Divine Audacity by Linda Martella-Whitsitt is still available in the bookstore, I believe. And then the book that Linda and I wrote together, I realized that too. I was like, I'm pushing her book. Why don't I push my book? In Discover Your Divinity, which is the book that Linda and I wrote together, there's a lot in there about the 12 powers. And there's a lot in there too about how to activate that through the power of affirmative prayer. And that is available in the bookstore too. So faith, strength, wisdom, and love. We talked last week about how these 4 powers work together so that faith is what we want to see with. Strength is what holds us rooted, grounds us, makes us steadfast. Wisdom is what guides us, and love is what unifies. And when we welcome those transforming alchemic powers together, working together, what it does is create this support for the inner conditions that we need to be able to transform. And so what we're focusing on this week is how transformation actually requires imagination, alignment, and the conscious use of our spiritual authority. Everybody take a deep breath, because this is the one where everybody gets a little you want me to have spiritual authority? I don't know about that. So, power, the ability of self-mastery to have dominion and control over what and over who? Me. Okay? Me. The misuse of power is when we try to control other people. Power aligned with our divine nature is about our self-mastery. Imagination is our ability to image, picture, conceptualize, envision, and dream. And it's powerful. It's how we understand co-creation to actually happen, is through our power of imagination. So what are your dreams? Are your dreams of despair and loss? What are you dreaming into being? Understanding. We're talking about spiritual understanding. It's our ability to know and perceive and comprehend and apprehend. So it's not just about our own self. It's about being open to understanding others, even if their perspective is completely different from your own. Do we need this right now more than ever? Whew. And then will. Will is our ability to choose, decide, command, lead, and determine. And we're not talking about will that comes from like, I want this now. Anybody ever feel like that? It felt good to do that little stomp like I'm 5. We're talking about will that is aligned with the highest and the best. Will that is aligned with our divine wisdom, with our understanding. So can you see how all of these have to work together? Right? We need them to bring them into balance and harmony together. So let's take a look at power. Power is really about our ability to concentrate. Anybody feel out of focus lately? Right? Squirrel, 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 squirrel. Like, whew. It's deliberate. It's deliberate. So we have the power to concentrate on what it is that we want to concentrate on. We also have the power to discipline our thoughts. Anybody in here got reactive lately watching the news? Right? Anybody in here? Right? I'm not alone in that? Okay, just checking. So how do we move past reactivity? Because reactivity doesn't do anything except make us feel a little bit better in that moment, like it's an escape valve. Brene Brown calls them like emotional burps. It's like you just kind of go, and then you're like, oh, okay, now. But you didn't change anything. And if she didn't call it that, she should have. It's about knowing when we are being called to speak and also knowing when we are called to just zip. Because I'm not in a place to speak from my divine understanding. I'm so reactive right now that I just want to burp all over you. You know, sometimes the things that come out of my mouth, like, wow, I could not have planned that if I tried, just so you know. Whew. And then lastly, and most importantly, it's our power of spiritual authority. It's our ability to tell truth to ourselves and to others. And that, I believe, is like part of our leading edge. To be able to speak truth, not just within ourselves and my little world, but to speak truth in the larger context of the world. So, Reverend Cameron Trimble, I got turned on to this by Elizabeth Middleburg. She sent me his blog. It was phenomenal. I'm going to be excerpting parts of it through my whole talk. You can find it. The Soul Beneath is what it was called, a meditation by Reverend Cameron Trimble. So he says that many of us were raised inside a story that told us history was bending steadily toward justice. Anybody in here understand that to be their truth? We were taught that the horrors of the 20th century had inoculated us against their return. Anybody in here feel like that? He says, but there is another story running underneath that one. Right? There is another story that is happening. And so what we are being invited into is the willingness to look at that story, to really look at it, and to bring our wholeness to what that story is. And this is where imagination becomes so helpful. Imagination is what allows us to conceive of new ideas. Do we need new ideas? Right? Kids know how to do this. They're thinking up new stuff all the time. They're not sort of limiting themselves by what they think is possible. They're just saying, what about that? How often do we cut ourselves off from what is possible because we think we're being smart and rational and, logical? It's our power of vision so that we can dream of what does not yet exist. Because what we are calling forth, does it exist? No. We have to envision it. We have to feel into it. And it is the power of embodiment, to live as if. And I love that. How many people in here are living as if this is a world that works for everyone? We want to, but are we? Right? Are we? So, Cameron Trimble goes on to say, this country was built on historic asymmetry. Some bodies are disposable so that others could feel secure. Some lands made extractable so that others could grow rich. Some lives marked as expendable so that others could imagine themselves protected. That pattern never disappeared. It simply learned how to speak the language of normalcy. So, we have to break past that language of normalcy, right? We have to go deeper than that language of normalcy, and this is where spiritual understanding comes into play. Because it's our ability to comprehend, make sense of my own experience, but not just my own experience. To make sense of lived experiences. It's the power to realize our divine identity. To be able to say, I am this divine being. I actually am that. And guess what? So are you, and you, and you, and even those people who I think are them. And it is the power of insight that we can actually learn from my life, like we can learn from the stories of other people's life. Even if I didn't have that lived experience, I'm being invited to learn from it, not dismiss it, not make it something that, that's negligible, but to actually say, what if I actually understood that? Because what he goes on to say is we are losing our capacity to hold complexity. We are being trained to collapse ambiguity into certainty, difference into threat, tension into a single strong story. Plurality requires patience and humility. It asks us to live without simple villains and simple heroes. It demands that we hold multiple truths without erasing someone in the process. Authoritarianism offers an escape from that work. It trades moral complexity for emotional simplicity. It replaces responsibility with compliance. I know, you really should go find it, because I'm just taking little excerpts from it. But can you feel how we are being called right there and there? Can you see how important imagination is? Because there's this single, strong story. We're being invited to blow it up. We're being invited to reimagine it in an entirely different way. We have to be able to sit with the uncertainty, with the complexity of what's actually happening. That one sentence, moral complexity gets traded for emotional simplicity. Spiritual understanding is what allows us to stand in that gray zone of moral complexity. That is what we're all being invited into. And believe me, I feel the pull of that emotional simplicity. But we are being invited to be and move through this story in a completely different way. And how we do that is with our will, our ability to choose, the power of choice. Are we aligning with divine intention and spiritual truth? Or are we aligning with what would make us feel better? with what feels comfortable, with what feels safe, with what has always been. It is the power of commitment. Are we willing to fulfill the promise to ourselves? The promise that we're making to ourselves to follow through on the things that we have chosen. We do that vision, mission, and core values every week because it helps us remember our commitment to what we are choosing. And it is a power of willingness that we will recommit again and again and again and again, right? To fulfill that promise to ourselves. He says, our culture is exhausted, metabolically exhausted. We are not only tired in the ordinary sense, we are relationally exhausted. We are spiritually depleted. Mystic James Finley says we have depth deprivation. We live inside an order that consumes connection and produces fear. We are how we break this cycle. We are the ones. Look at where our values are: community, connectivity, authenticity, spiritual truth. We are the antidote to depth deprivation. But we have to be willing to walk into the deep end. We have to be willing to let go of the edge of the pool and swim out where we may not know where the currents are going to take us. But we have to trust. That's where the other pieces come in. Faith, right? This is where our strength, all of those pieces that we build up within inside ourselves, allow us to then begin to energize what is needed to be a catalyst for change. So we're looking with these 4 powers to transform inner clarity into outer action. Power is what expresses. Power is our ability to speak truth. Power is what makes affirmative prayer so impactful. Power is our capacity to be able to stand in what we know to be true and real and just from a spiritual perspective and speak from that authority. You know, I've been watching the news and you see cardinals and you see all these people in religious authority coming out and saying, the Pope saying, this ain't right. And that's great that they're doing that. But real change, real transformation is going to happen when we are all doing that. They don't have some line to God that we don't have. They don't have something that we don't have. So we're all being called to show up as that voice, speaking truth, expressing truth. Imagination is what allows us to envision something new and real and beautiful. And understanding is what illuminates the darkness. Understanding is what allows us to take in all these different perspectives and hold them up from a place of truth. And will is what allows us to keep showing up. Not trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Anybody ever done that? You know that feeling, right? Where you're just kind of banging your head against the wall. And I remember when I was doing my practitioner training, I had this image of myself like bloodied because I just kept banging my head against the wall and the wall wasn't giving way. Anybody in here relate? Am I alone in that one? And then all of a sudden I realized in my meditation that all I had to do was stop and look left or right. And I had a completely different path open to me. We're not talking about our small will, our little ego will. It's got to look the way I want it to look. We're talking about that larger understanding of who we actually are. And together, this creates a dynamic force that will turn our insights into action. And that's what we're all being called to show up actively in a different way. Because this, I think, is so true. When people are deprived of the freedom to participate meaningfully in shaping their futures, something inside them withers. Vitality does not disappear, it curdles. It turns into resentment and the longing for someone who promises control. We are the antidote. I really need you to hear that, and I need you to believe it because I believe it with every fiber of my being. We are the antidote to a culture that does not value connectivity, but instead is drawn to fear. We are the place where that kind of change can happen. Could you imagine? I just want you to really try to imagine with me. What would the world be like if we're all anchoring as a voice of truth, integrity, boldness, creativity, vision, understanding, depth, commitment, and follow through? This is what these 4 powers offer us. It is how we can participate meaningfully in shaping the future and becoming builders of a new reality. So our practice for the week, right? Each of these powers is inviting us into a practice. It's inviting us to sit with how can I grow this power for myself, this ability that I already have. How do I take my vitality, which would be zeal, we're going to talk about that next week, and keep it from curdling into resentment? The power is still active, it's just not working for the greatest good. So, with the power of power, which I know is weird, I know that's weird, ask, what does it mean to be rooted and speak for my spiritual authority? Really ask yourself that. What does that mean to you? What does that look like? Because each one of us is individual. Y'all aren't going to get up here and speak the way I speak. There are things that you're doing in the world that I would never be able to do in the world. That's the beauty of plurality. So how does this authentically look like you? How do you move and speak from your spiritual authority? And then this week, just practice speaking truthful words of healing to inspire yourself and the world. What if you woke up every day and said, I am going to speak truthful words of healing to myself right now in the mirror? And I'm also going to look for someone out there in the world today that I am going to offer truth to them. You're a beautiful person. Thank you for all you're doing in the world. It doesn't have to be a whole monologue. It could be just one sentence to someone. Somebody said that they were in a store with their friend, and their friend was trying on a dress, and it was a small sort of boutique-y kind of thing. And their friend came out in the dress, and a woman was walking by, and she stopped, stuck her head in the store, and said, "Oh, baby, that's fabulous on you." And then kept going. How hard is that? Made their day, made her day, right? Make somebody's day. Imagination, spend some time dreaming of what's possible. I know it's hard when we feel like there's something oppressive. How do we dream about possibility? And then ask, what wants to be revealed through me? What is mine to become in all of this? What is the vision that's calling me forward in all of this? Because for each of us, again, it's going to be different. Isn't that fabulous? Understanding. So this is an opportunity to reflect rather than react. Deepen before deciding. Oh, breathe into that. What is the spiritual truth I'm being invited to understand and embody in the world? Somebody pisses you off. Somebody does or says something that's hurtful. How can you stop? Deepen before deciding. How can you shift perspective? How can you begin to see things from a different point of view? And then will. How are you showing up? How are you showing up? What does that look like for you? And are you willing to commit to aligning boldly with divine intention, even when it feels uncomfortable? Even when it might feel easier to just go back to bed, pull the covers up over your head, have another glass of wine, eat another pizza, watch another Netflix series and binge your way through it, right? We all have the ways that we navigate and cope. Read another trashy novel, right? Hallmark is out in force because Valentine's Day is coming, right? You could just lose yourself in those Hallmark rom-coms, right? It's totally predictable. There's a reason why they're so popular. They're completely predictable. So, how can you stay true to your divine intention even when it's not comfortable? Right? You all know who you are. I know you know who you are. Let's take all of this into a time of meditation. That's a lot, yes? So as we're breathing into whatever might have gotten stirred up, whatever the activity is of the heart, just breathing into, just pick one power for right now. Is it standing in your spiritual authority, speaking truth? Healing truth? Opening truth? Soothing truth? Is it the call to envision something that's wonderful and free and joy-filled? Whether it's in your own life or whether it's for the larger collective, it doesn't matter. Are you anchoring possibility concretely? Are you being invited to deepen into your spiritual understanding? And are you being called to show up and commit more fully? How are you being invited to help move this world from fear to connection? So let's just rest here. Rest for a few minutes in the silence as we listen, not from that human understanding which we bless, but from that deepest wellspring of who we truly are, our most authentic self, our most loving self, our most compassionate self. Let's rest and listen in the silence. How grateful I am for this opportunity to be still and know, to open into the wholeness, the fullness of who and what I truly am, the fullness of that which we all are, and the willingness, just the willingness to stand in our power, to open and create with our imagination, to deepen into our spiritual understanding, and to commit fully to a world that truly works for everyone. In gratitude for this and so much more, I do give thanks. I invite you to know the truth of this with me by saying, and so it is. Amen. Ashe. So our affirmation this week, I'll say it first and then I'll invite you to say it with me. I am power, imagination, understanding, and will. I imagine expansively, commit fully, and speak truth boldly to create a more loving and just world. Can we know this together, please? I am power, imagination, understanding, and will. I imagine expansively, commit fully, and speak truth boldly to create a more loving and just world. And so it is. Amen.